Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Talk about crying in your beer. He was, literally. He was on his fourth or fifth glass when I got there. Something happened and I was a little late. Sliding onto the stool next to him, I pointed at him, and soon there was another beer in front of him. It was nasty outside. The sleet was falling sideways under a strong wind. It was like grains of sand thrown in your face. I needed something to warm up quickly. I dropped a glass of brandy into a mug and drained it in one gulp. The next one slipped even more easily. After that, I returned only to the beer. I reached the pink glow I was looking for. I'm probably going to babysit this until I leave. Tony started to lose his patience, so I took a table and ordered him some food, asking him to refrain from drinking for a while. I wanted him to be close enough to fully understand our conversation. He almost inhaled a dozen hot wings and a large order of fried potatoes. He probably shouldn't have skipped lunch earlier. I knew he'd never find her in an hour, and he didn't. The fool was right in front of me, and then she just stood up and disappeared. I checked out her mom, her friends, the people she works with. No one knew anything. He paused and took a sip of beer. Do you think Chris will cheat on me? We've only been married a year. Could she really have done something like that? I let him chat for a minute before I stopped him. Tony, be honest. Isn't that how you got her? His mouth opened for a second before he launched into a tirade. Oh, you idiot. How could you say that? I tried to keep a straight face, hoping he wouldn't be able to see my eyes through the dim lighting and alcohol fog. I can say that, Tony, because it's true. You were both married when you met, and you were each other's best friends at the time. There is a precedent here. If she cheats on one husband, what's to stop her from doing it with another? After all, she's already had a little practice, and she's probably hiding it pretty well. He listened attentively. One could almost see the thought gaining momentum in his foggy brain. I moved forward. Maybe she spent a lot of time with friends. Does she go to the bachelorette party often? Have you ever wondered, when you're bowling and she's not answering her home phone, where she might be? Or if the cell phone goes straight to voicemail, will she call you back in a few minutes, out of breath? All this is easily explained. Motive and opportunity, Tony. If she wants to cheat, she'll find a way, and you can do shit with it. No, he whined, holding his head. She loves me. Says the man who was all over Gloria when I came in. Let me guess, you just needed a shoulder to cry on. Gloria was the local punch board. The girl had problems. She was pretty, by no means stupid, but for some reason it was hard for her to say no. Most of them just met her at a bar, poured her a few drinks, and took her to their apartment or a cheap motel. I treated her to wine, fed her lunch, invited her to dance, and at the end of the evening I took her home, gave her a couple of very sweet kisses and left. The next night, she attacked me. Why did you leave? Because the date is over. By the way, I had a very good time. I would really like to do it again someday. The answer is yes, whenever you ask, she said, grinning. But you know what I'm talking about. You know I'd do anything I could to use you blindly if I could get you into my apartment. Why? Why what? What is it? She asked, clearly confused. Why did you want to use me blindly? Because I asked you out. Was I trying to show you how good you were having a good time? Because you thought that was what I needed. Something that you felt you owed me? Baby, I like to meet someone I'm interested in. See if we're right for each other. See if I want to get past the first date. I'm 32. My days of using and running away are long over. If that's all you want, every guy in this bar and some women would like to be your bedfellows. It's just not me, honey. Are you sure you're a man? You're not some kind of hero in a romance novel brought to life by some strange curse or magic, are you? Just a guy. I laughed, maybe a little out of the norm, but still just a guy. We talked a little more. Shortly before we broke up, she asked me a question that I found it difficult to answer. What's wrong with me, huh? Why am I doing all this? And please be honest. I can accept that. I sighed. Darling, I don't know you very well, but I'll tell you what I think based on what I know. I think something in your past has made you really insecure about yourself, damaged your self-image. Maybe that's why you sleep with everyone who asks. You're an attractive woman, Gloria, but you can't stand to sit around in this bar. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but you've developed a little flair, and your skin is suffering from a lack of sun. I was watching her face when I realized what I had said. Strangely enough, she didn't look in pain. She seemed more thoughtful. Here's Dr. Chill's recommendation. Spend less time in bars. Join a gym, go to sports, maybe go running. Spend more time outside. Include the word no in your vocabulary. And Gloria, do it for yourself, not because I or anyone else tells you to. Learn to love yourself before you try to find love with someone else. She nodded once or twice, got up, kissed me on the cheek, and left. I haven't seen her for over 2 weeks. Having returned my attention to Tony, I probably should have been more empathetic with him. I've been cheated on before. For years have passed, and it still hurts. I bet she said that to her first husband every time she came home after spending time with you. Maybe she even meant it. Who knows for sure? You probably said the same thing to your wife at the time. Maybe then you guys really believed it. When did it stop being an affair and become a relationship? I made him stagger, and I didn't calm down, even when painful memories surfaced. He needed to understand what kind of person he was. Her husband worked so hard. I mean, he was my best friend, but he was so serious all the time. My wife wasn't that bad, but sometimes she had to work long hours. I called hoping to catch Charlie, but he wasn't there, and we were ending the conversation. We started having lunch together from time to time. Charlie knew it. We didn't try to hide anything, and he really thanked me. Jen, my wife, was ready for this promotion, so she spent hours traveling, even though she hated it. She didn't mind us spending time together either, saying she knew I was safe from temptation if I was with her best friend. He paused, a slight grin appearing on his face. The first time it was an accident. We crashed to pieces. I couldn't even drive. We had to take a taxi back to her house. We opened another bottle of wine, and by the time it was finished, we were completely engrossed in each other. God, we felt terrible the next morning. He swore that it would never happen again, and that we would never tell anyone. We did it for about 4 months before it happened again. Jen was in Cleveland, and Charlie was in Atlanta. We didn't even get out of the house. We looked at each other, and I grabbed her hand, dragging her into the bedroom. She tried to stop me, but not very hard. I felt like such an ass for using her in his bed, but I couldn't stop. The floodgates were open. We started dating while they were in town, had long lunches, and spent time at their house after lunch, since she wasn't working. We became careless, and one day they both surprised us. Jen was screaming, he was screaming, Chris was crying, and I was being stupid. I was about to hit Charlie when Jen hit me with her purse. She seemed to have filled it with rocks, but it was just the trash she insists on. She managed to dislocate my jaw. It still hurts when it gets cold and wet. He stopped, rubbing his jaw, remembering. What happened then? I asked, already knowing the answer. According to Reader's Digest, we are all divorced. I was pretty well hosed down in the settlement because it's not a state without fault, and Chris didn't do a very good job either. She got 40% of his 60. He insisted that they sell the house if she couldn't buy a share, knowing how much she loved him and all the hours she spent making it a showcase. She couldn't use it in any way, so it was sold. In addition, she received a minimum of alimony for 3 years if she did not remarry. The business was released due to a prenuptial agreement. But you guys told me that you got married in less than a year. I interjected when he paused for a drink. Of course, it cost her alimony. That's how it was. But it wasn't much to begin with. I had a good job, and she went back to work. It gave us a decent life. Not the lifestyle we had before, but our bills were paid and we didn't have much left. We're talking about trying to buy a house next year. Well done, guys. Once upon a time, many years ago, I had a house. Ownership is a wonderful thing. And so it was. I remembered it well. He sighed. Yes, but plans may change. Right now, I just don't know. Cheer up, I said heartily. I'm sure it's nothing. Let me tell you about my night. I met someone, a real baby. She is everything I would like to see in a woman. I think she has feelings for me, but there is one drawback. She's already married. His drunken grin returned. You sneaky bastard. I never imagined you hunting a married woman. Be careful, bro. I know from experience that some husbands can get downright irritable if they find out about it. He paused, grinning. Still, it's a rush, isn't it? For example, hunting an endangered species or riding a Maserati. You know it's wrong and illegal, but that's the most interesting thing. I sighed. Yes, but I doubt that I will continue. And yet she is a wonderful woman. Have another drink with me, and I'll take you home. We can pick up your car tomorrow. He grumbled, but agreed. He already had one charge of driving under the influence of alcohol, and he couldn't afford another one. I looked at him as I drove. He was passed out and drooling. He would never have guessed if I hadn't sent scraps of information, made general remarks, and asked vague questions. All this, as well as the fact that he received nothing, aroused his suspicions. He couldn't concentrate on his work, and he didn't sleep well. I drove into his garage. His wife Chris came out expecting to see his car. "What are you doing here, Chill? Where's Tony?" "Sleeping. I'll bring him into the house if you keep the door open." Her eyes narrowed in anger, but she helped me drag him into the house and put him on the bed. She took off his shoes, loosened his tie, and stepped back. "It will delay him. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. Thanks for bringing him home. You're a better friend than he deserves." I am exactly what he deserves, I thought, ordering her coffee. "I'm not drunk, but I've had a few drinks. We don't have to work tomorrow, so I'll come by after lunch and take him to get his car." "Everything is fine?" Fortunately, it was not too late. He was stunned before 10, so she agreed, and we spent a pleasant 90 minutes talking. I think she was a little lonely, and I started talking about her again, finding out everything I could. Why am I doing this? Because she was a married woman who interested me, and I fully intended to take her away from him. Was I a rotten bastard? Damn right, but I had my reasons. Before I turned into a flaming asshole of epic proportions, I thought I was a pretty good guy. He did not drink too much, did not use illegal substances, did not gamble, did not harass other women. Sandy, my wife, said that I should be what the Boy Scouts strive for. I worked a lot at a decent job, loved my wife, even went to church. However, obviously Sandy didn't want a Boy Scout. She needed an asshole, and she went and bought one. Then she took another one. She was with asshole number 3 when I caught her. What I wasn't prepared for was her obvious arrogance. It seems that giving her everything she wanted gave her a disproportionate sense of entitlement. "Oh, just get over it already. I still love you. I just need a little more. You've been getting seconds most of the time we've been married. It hasn't hurt you yet, has it? I make sure they're clean, and I make sure they don't interfere with our time together. Throw a tantrum, do something stupid, and I'll take everything you have." She didn't know it at the time, but she had already taken everything I had. Everything else was just junk, and I could always get more stuff. The lawyer I contacted said about the same thing. The fact that she confessed to it didn't mean anything until I had proof. Even then, the best I could hope for was 50%. Did I hire a private investigator, bugged the house, installed GPS in her car, bugged her purse? I bought a tiny dictaphone at Best Buy for $39 and called her, offering to try again. "It's about time," she snorted, telling me where and when we were going to meet. "And don't try to do anything stupid." "I'll know." Well, that plan went out the window. I asked a friend of my parents and her husband to come to the restaurant she chose and record the conversation from 3 tables. Partially deaf, she wore headphones and a small phone-sized box that amplified the sound. She was able to record the entire conversation on tape. I still have it. Instead of trying to reconcile, she spent 40 minutes welcoming me into my new lifestyle as a willing cuckold, explaining a whole list of rules that I had to follow. I barely kept a straight face, told her I'd think about it, and left. She didn't hug or kiss me, she just left. My marriage didn't break up with a bang. It wasn't even whispered about. But it made my lawyer grin. He really laughed when I told him that I wanted her to have everything. A house, cars, a boat, etc. She also received all payments. All I took was $20,000 of our savings, which she, in her arrogance, did not close and disappeared for 3 years. I had a skill set that was apparently very desirable in the Middle East. No, I wasn't a mercenary. I had one real fight in the 3rd grade, and I got beaten up pretty badly. My father put gold gloves on me. I was pretty good at it, but I didn't really do it seriously. I knew the bottling lines. My company produced apple juice and sauce, and in the off-season subcontracted it to a sports drinks company. We got a new labeling machine that no one knew how to start or fix. The management was full of shit, and the company didn't have anyone to send to help us. So I experimented, and we learned by trial and error. I completely rewrote the manual, making the instructions simple and included the troubleshooting chapter. When production jumped by 30%, everyone noticed it, and soon the guys from the corporation came down to figure out why. The beverage company eventually gave me a check for the manual and used it elsewhere. They offered me a job, but it was in Chicago, and it was February, and my wife turned it down pretty quickly. This episode caused me to confess, and Headhunter called me, offering me jobs in different places at different companies, which I refused until my marriage broke up. The next time he called, I told him I'd think about it if he could find me something as far away from where I was as possible. He was silent for a moment. What about Saudi Arabia? They're actually looking for someone with your specific skill set. Wow. Well, I said far away. I did not know that apples are grown in Saudi Arabia. It's not apples, it's water. Actually, it's a pretty neat setup. They make fresh water from seawater and sell it along with the sea salt they extract. Nothing is wasted. They really need a production manager, and their salary is excellent. What's the catch? It should be there. He sighed. The catch is that this is Saudi Arabia. You are 8 miles from the nearest city, and if you go, the company will not be responsible. You probably wouldn't have been killed. Kidnapping for ransom is the most important thing right now. But you get 1 week off every quarter, and they'll even take you wherever you want to go. The salary is 3 times what you earn now, and there is a bonus of $15,000 after you finish the first year, 10 for the next, and you have to sign a 2-year contract. He continued to serve. On the positive side, accommodation and meals are provided, so the cost of living is limited to any additional services you want. You work 12 days, 2 days off, and, as I said, 1 week off. Think about it. I was chatting about it until she did something really stupid. She and her jerk were outside in the parking lot when I finished work. I saw them and walked on, thought about it, and returned to her car, which was parked at his window. Cool down. Come to me. This shit has been going on long enough. She frowned, and a silly grin appeared on his face. I can hear you perfectly well from here, you fool. You need to leave. Does he know that he's the third since we got married? Or have you already confessed your true love to him? She started to say something, but he beat her to it. I thought I wasn't the first, but I intend to be the last. Now she has found a real man. I'll keep her in line. For a second, I liked the way she frowned. I bet that's what she said the first time. I hope you have a good job. This fool is very demanding of service. Her favorite saying is, I want to. And if you've ever put your hand in the snow, you'll realize how cold your bed will be until she gets what she wants. Now get lost and don't ever come here again. In fact, if you can get this cheater to never talk to me again, I'll make it worth your time. Since we broke up, I've met some real beauties. Next time she cuts you off or calls you a little asshole, call me. I'll see if I can pick you up. You'll just be easier to control, and if she wants more, she'll start trolling. She did this to me 3 times and I didn't know anything. Think about it. I put my hand on the zipper. Do you want to watch it, honey, one more time, for old time's sake? When I leave, he leaves with me. She was furious. The people leaving heard the conversation and grinned like crazy. She had such a red face that I was afraid, hoping that she would hit me. Little Dick had finally had enough. I'm going to kick your ass. She screamed as she opened the door. I was out of reach, and when he put his foot out, I grabbed the door with both hands and pushed as hard as I could. He wasn't expecting this, and I heard a crunch, and he screamed. I stepped back and pulled out my phone, dialing 911. Soon the police appeared, then the ambulance. He had a fracture of both bones of the lower part of his left leg. They talked to the witnesses, whom I asked to stay, and after the third person told them that he had threatened me, they just filled out a report. My future ex was furious when she found out that I wasn't going to be arrested. Why don't you arrest him? She shouted at the policeman. Why, ma'am? As far as I can tell, he has never threatened violence, and it is still legal to insult someone. Your friend told him that he was going to hurt him when he got out of the car, and he acted in self-defense. Maybe you want to go to the hospital now, check on your friend. He turned to me. Would you like to get a restraining order against them? It will be pretty easy when they read my report. It might save you some grief in the future. He was standing with his back to her and grinning. Thank you, officer. I hadn't thought of that. I'm going downstairs first thing tomorrow to fill out the paperwork. I looked at her and grinned. She took a deep breath, but decided not to speak, got behind the wheel and drove away. I have one more shot left. If I'm not mistaken, there's no insurance on this car, officer. You might want to check it out. Since the car was in my name, I canceled the insurance 2 weeks ago. Surprise. When I drove by, she was standing next to her car and trying to explain something. I honked the horn and waved. She looked at me, and it dawned on her. I could almost hear her screaming as I drove away. Saudi Arabia was an interesting country. It wasn't fun, it wasn't torture, it was just boring. All we did was work, eat, and sleep. We had satellite TV, the latest movies on video, a gym, basketball, and tennis courts. We had the internet, so we could chat with friends, make Facebook, even attend online classes. For obvious reasons, very few of the employees were women. Those who were there were usually married to another employee. Naturally, the fact that so many guys were with so many women was a recipe for disaster. More than half of the couples either left before the end of the contract or divorced. I kept my hormones in check until I came to France every quarter. Despite being rude and having a low opinion of Americans, I found that French girls still like to use us, especially if you spend money on them. I've learned how to get out of big cities. In small towns, as a rule, it was a little friendlier. The girls were cleaner. The prices were lower. But I really liked the Riviera and the nudist beaches. I went to a couple of casinos and watched the fools lose money. I played around a bit. The keyword was small, just enough so that I wouldn't get kicked out. After betting once on a game that I couldn't pronounce and didn't understand, let the bet slip 5 times before I cash out. I was furious when they told me that I had won 80,000 euros. Not knowing what to do with them, I put the money in the casino. The next vacation found me in a small competition room and with all the additional amenities. I lost 8,000, which pleased the management. On the next trip, I won them back and another 20,000. The next time I got a little drunk, I was stupid and lost 40,000. I never came back. Surprisingly, the years passed quite quickly. Thanks to my gambling winnings, I decided that I would not stay for another year. They surprised me when I told them about it, offering me a job as an assistant manager with a 40% salary increase and a bonus of $30,000. After thinking it over for a few days, I signed it. I contacted my lawyer, talked to my mom and stepbrother once a month just to keep in touch. My ex, to put it mildly, was not happy when I left the country. I gave a power of attorney to a lawyer. It was actually quite simple. She received all the joint property in the marriage, minus the 20,000 that I took. The net worth was much more than the debt, so despite her objections, the judge granted the divorce, citing that the assets would more than compensate for any alimony she would be given. Of course, she couldn't afford everything without my income, and her new man left quite early, saying he wouldn't pay for things he would never own. She managed to sell the house at a small profit, as well as my boat and everything else, and she left town. As a result, I worked for another year as a factory manager. I might still be there if my mom hadn't called me. She was crying. "This is Charlie. He was in a serious accident. You need to go home." Charlie was my stepbrother. My mother married his father 12 years ago, 3 years after my real father disappeared. He was a good man, treated my mother well, and seemed to love me. In a year's time, I'll just introduce him as my father, which he seemed to like. Charlie was about 10 when they got married. I never had any siblings, but I was old enough to enjoy it. I helped him when I broke up a fight after school one day. I was a senior in high school, and he was in his first year of high school. The schools were side by side, and I would come and pick up Charlie to take us home. "Leave him alone, you assholes. If you touch my brother again, I'll kick your ass." I'm a pretty big guy, and the 12 and 13-year-old bullies quickly retreated. I boxed with golden gloves, as I said, even won the regional championship when I was 15, but soon realized that I would never be good enough to make a career out of it. However, the skills I've learned have come in handy from time to time. That same day, I found my old gloves and worked with him. Soon we were sparring or training 4 days a week. It paid off when, a year later, he beat the shit out of 2 bullies and they didn't even pick on him. I only had 5 weeks left on my contract, and I told them I wouldn't renew it. It was time to go home. Under the circumstances, they abandoned my last weeks, wishing me well and making me promise to remember them if I wanted to return. When I got there, he was in a coma, and it didn't look good. "What happened?" Mom sighed. He hasn't been doing very well lately. He lost his wife because she cheated on him with his best friend, and then his company shut down. He started drinking. They say it was one of the factors in the crash. We kept vigil and prayed, but 8 days later he passed away. His ex was visiting for a few minutes. I was walking to the bathroom and caught a glimpse of a blonde hugging my mom. When I returned, she was gone. She didn't go to the funeral. It turns out that I was the executor of his estate. It also turned out that despite the fact that his company had closed, they had kept him on full salary and benefits for 6 months. He was 2 weeks away from death, so insurance paid most of his medical bills. He also had a company insurance policy for $50,000, double indemnity. Since he died in an accident, it paid off. He recently changed the beneficiary to me. He also had a private policy for the same amount as Mom, so we both got $100,000 each. His savings closed the medical bill. I asked my mom about his ex-wife. He got married about 8 months after I left, and I never met her. I liked her. She was a sweet little girl, trusting and gentle. I think she really loved him. If she loved him, why did they get divorced? He left her alone too often. He was striving for success, and his job required traveling and long hours of work. His best friend, Snake, she said it with more disgust than I've ever heard her say, seduced her. He was married, so he ruined 2 marriages. She begged Charlie to forgive her, but he was too offended. She eventually married a snake. It won't take too long to explode. She doesn't deserve it, but he deserves it. And here I am. Between my accumulated salary and my life insurance policy, I had a little over $400,000 in cash. I didn't have to look for a job right away, although the bounty hunter I used to use called me almost weekly with offers. I told him that I wanted to take a few months off and would call him when I was ready to return to work. I talked to my brother's friends. I talked to Snake's ex-wife. He's an asshole. I was just too much in love with him to see it. I would like to say that I hate her for this affair, but she was just as much a victim as I was. I can't believe she married him. Well, now you've already guessed that the woman I seduced was my brother's ex-wife, and now the snake is Tony. I did my research before deciding what actions to take. While I was pretty much over it, my experience with my wife left me with a low attitude toward scammers. I found Charlie's diary on his computer, dated 6 years ago. He told me about meeting Chris and how he fell in love with her. He filled 3 pages expressing his joy when she agreed to marry him, planning more for their future together. Over the past year, he has expressed concern about those moments when he left her alone, worried that she might distance herself from him, worried about the innocence and trustfulness that partially attracted him to her. The discovery of her deception manifested itself in incoherent rants and bouts of deep despair. Even then, he might have forgiven her if Tony hadn't given him the recordings of their lovemaking, taking revenge for his own wife divorcing him. His last recording was made 2 days before his death. Chris called him, cried, begged him to give her a chance to talk to him. He was thinking about it, and Tony found out about it and sent him some more tapes. Charlie seemed to think Chris didn't know she was being taped. He was drinking on the night of his death, but an autopsy showed that he was well below the legal limit. I think he had too many thoughts and wasn't paying attention. It was surprisingly easy to get into their lives. I applied and got a job at his company, earning about 1/3 of what I earned abroad. I shrugged my shoulders during the interview when a human resources employee asked why I was here and not still abroad. I'm tired of it and I'm lonely. When all you do is work and you can see women once every 13 weeks, you don't have much of a life. I want to meet someone, settle down. It seemed to satisfy them. So the next week, I worked next to him. He was as arrogant and selfish as I imagined him to be. For 3 weeks, I was invited every Thursday to their bachelor party at the local pub, where I bought cheap booze for the bastard until he got drunk. I talked to the other guys and to the person who didn't care about him. Watch your woman when he's around. He's a jerk, but he has a shit line, and when he turns on the charm, he can talk a nun into taking off her panties. It's sad, really. His wife is the sweetest creature you've ever met, and she's very hot. After drinking with him for the 3rd time, I eventually took him home. I drove up and knocked lightly on the door. When she answered, my breath caught in my throat. It would seem that I was delighted, but they didn't do her justice. It could be said that she had a beautiful figure under this robe, her almost platinum blonde hair escaping from a loose ponytail. She had such blue eyes that at first they seemed amazing. Despite their beauty, they were sad, tired, and older than her body. Suddenly, I felt insecure about my path. Hello. I don't know if Tony ever talked about me, but I'm his buddy. We have been working together for some time now. We got a little carried away, things got a little out of control, and we thought it was better for him not to drive. She shook my hand hesitantly, then held the door open while I half led him into the bedroom. He fell onto the bed like a felled tree and instantly passed out. I started to correct him, but she told me to leave him. Chris walked me to the door, thanked me for looking after him, and started to close it. Wait a second. Tell him to call me if he needs to take him to work in the morning. He can pick up his car on the way. It was nice to meet you, Chris. Good night. Thanking me again. She closed the door. I came up with a way to meet them socially. I admit that Chris was amazing, with a gorgeous body and long blonde hair, a small cupid's bow mouth, and really great legs. They seemed to be saying they had to be fantastic to hold that amazing ass. She seemed nice. Chris frowned slightly when we were introduced, as if searching her memory. I didn't have a last name like Charlie or my mom, and she had never seen me before. She probably saw my photos taken many years ago. I was bigger. You tend to gain weight when one of your safety valves is exercising. I had much shorter hair and a goatee. Finally, I dropped a bomb on good old Tony by sending him a recording of me making love to Chris. I blurred my face so he couldn't tell what kind of man was sleeping with his wife. He was ranting in front of me, promising death when he caught whoever it was. He also promised to kick Chris out. I'm going to teach this fool a lesson first. When I'm done with her, she'll have nothing to offer her new man in terms of looks. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard you say, Tony. Is she worth going to jail for? Go away, boy. I really hoped that he would ignore my advice. I didn't want her to be physically hurt, but the fact that he will serve a little time in prison won't upset me. I called Chris. It's time to move on to plan B. Tony knows, but I do not know where. We must not have been as careful as we thought. He is very angry and is on his way home. Go to my house, pull into the garage, and close the doors. Don't open the door. If he comes, call the police immediately. I'll be home soon and we'll discuss what to do next. I already knew what I was going to do next. The house was rented, the car was rented, and my job was pretty much a joke. We were getting out of town as fast as we could. She had already moved a lot of small things, and she didn't need furniture. I actually forced her to go to the bank and withdraw exactly half of their money from their checking and savings account, forcing her to put it in an account in her name only, mostly to make him angry. It worked. I'm going to kill this fool. He was ranting at work. He had just been served in front of everyone. Leave it alone. From what you said, she didn't take anything more than she would have gotten anyway. Tell her you're going to find her and beat the shit out of her. You'll get a free trip to jail, and all the money you have left will go to bail and lawyers. You could even go to jail. She left you in the dust, man. Surprisingly, this time you're really right, Tony. Obviously, she doesn't want to be with you anymore. Let her go and get another one. It seems like it's pretty easy for you. He bragged a lot about his abilities. The asshole grinned, thinking about the possibilities that the future held. I guess you're right, but it still pisses me off. And I'd still like to know who that bastard is. After we moved in, I sent him a nice video without blurring my face. When the sex scenes ended, including me entering all her holes, there were a few minutes when I smiled at the camera, explaining in detail why I did what I did. He was my brother. He's a good guy, and he doesn't deserve the shit you put on him. In my opinion, in many ways the cause of his death is you. You need to think about your lifestyle. Ben sent me a picture of your face after he was done with you. I wonder who told him you were snooping on Judy? Oh wait, it was me. My biggest hope is that the next time you use another married woman, the man will get so angry that he will kill you. If I find out, I'll dig until I find this guy and talk to him. My best advice to you is to move and start over. The guys are watching you now. We already know about it. Later I heard that he tried to contact another woman and got 2 broken ribs and very bruised testicles for it. It's not my fault. The guy found out about it himself. If he hadn't done it in the bar, Tony would have been killed. The guy had to pay hospital bills, do 6 months of community service, and attend anger management counseling. Most of the trial was occupied by a detailed description of his past exploits, given by me to the defense attorney. After sentencing, the judge told Tony that he needed to start a new hobby before the one he now had, sleeping with married women, would kill him. I was actually present at the trial, wanting to testify. After listening to my story, the lawyer refused, but still asked me to come to upset him. I could tell by the look in his eyes that he wanted to attack me, but this time he was smart enough to listen to his lawyer. We returned to my hometown. The first time we went to visit my mother, she was in shock. We had a pleasant visit, and after we returned home, I explained why I did what I did. She cried, realizing that she had been used again. "What's going to happen now? Are you going to kick me out?" I dropped my stones and got my revenge. "So now I'm done?" I deserved her tirade. So I listened to her in silence until she ran out of words to let me speak. "You're right. I'm a terrible person. But if you admit it, you deserve at least some of it. I had every intention of putting you out on the street when I was done, but I actually had feelings for you. That's the thing. Stay with me, at least until we sort out our emotions. If you want to leave or I decide that you should leave, I promise to give you enough money to find a place and live well enough for 6 months. After that, you're on your own. A deal?" She agreed to the deal, and we lived as husband and wife for 8 months. And she was the best thing I've ever had. Some people can draw, others can write, some are mechanical or mathematical geniuses. She was inventive, funny, and there was nothing two people could do that she wouldn't try. Not in terms of betting. I found her funny and sweet. I asked her what she wanted to do with her life when we first met, and a month later she showed me ceramics. They were works of art made of clay, funny, sad, some mostly for decoration, but many were functional. The most amazing thing was that they were very suitable for her. I think she studied with her uncle, one of the famous potters in the area. He was a big shot. He even had pots at the National Gallery and the Smithsonian Institution. She wanted to start doing it again. So I rented a small building for her and bought her everything she needed to open a store. She worked 6 days a week for 3 months and then advertised in the newspaper for a Saturday sale. Many remembered her uncle, and the turnout was significant. She gave everyone who came a number. If the answer showed what she could expect, she had a very good business at work. I couldn't believe that people were willing to pay. 2 months later, I was sitting at the kitchen table when she came in. Little red flags were flying everywhere. I checked it professionally. It was a fellow potter with whom she was close when she first learned the craft. They were together at least 3 times at her store. I didn't even know that the sofa in her office was a folding one. One look and she understood everything. To her credit, she didn't try to beg or bargain. She just sighed and asked if she could wait until the weekend to pick up her things. I gave her the time she wanted and some money to support her until her business got on firmer ground. Charlie would like that. The sad truth was that I expected her to do it. I researched her past and found one boyfriend and one fiancé she cheated on. It was the same with Charlie. If she had stayed with Tony and I hadn't appeared in the frame, it would have been someone else in the end. Over the next 20 years, she got married and divorced 4 more times, which was caused by her cheating in every way. She even warned the last 2, and they married her anyway. I didn't linger. I called the bounty hunter, and he returned me to Saudi Arabia 6 weeks later. I signed 2 more contracts, replenishing my account. Now it was almost $750,000, thanks to a smart investment advisor. It was right after the economy collapsed, and I wanted to buy a nice house, or maybe some kind of investment property. The realtor showed me some pretty good properties, but they were all wrong for various reasons. Then the real estate agent showed me a set of apartments, 12 duplexes in pretty bad condition. Structurally, they were reliable, but quite old. I bought them at a bargain price, leaving me enough money to put them in order. I used contractors when needed, but did a lot of repairs myself, mostly roofing, painting, and floors. Plumbing and electrics were out of my league, and I left them to the professionals. 8 were occupied in 3 months, and a year later they were all repaired, and I filled 90% on average. The economy improved, and I resold them for 4 times the price. I already had another set that I wanted if the price was acceptable. It was an inheritance, and the new owner wasn't sure she wanted to do it. I was hoping the cash would sway her. They were in another city, 100 miles away, but I was used to moving. In fact, I have agreed with the new apartment owners that I will receive 6 months of free rent. I had 2 months left when there was a knock on the door. It was Sandy, my ex. I haven't seen her in almost 4 years. She seemed stunned. What are you doing here? What is it? She asked immediately. She still didn't have warm and fluffy feelings about how I left her. I live here. What do you want? Well, I just moved 4 houses down. I had no idea you lived here. No one else was home, and my door was locked. I had my keys and phone in my purse, so I just knocked on the door until someone answered. Can I use your phone to call the management company? Against my better judgment, I let her in by dialing the number for her, as I knew it by heart. She spoke, explaining her situation, and they promised that they would send someone with the keys soon. It started to rain, so I let her stay, busy packing. She looked at the paintings on my walls and tables. Charlie, Mom, my stepfather and dad, the friends I made in Saudi Arabia, old school and college friends I still stayed close to. There were even 1 or 2 pictures of Chris. She was on a break between husbands at the time I returned, and we slept together again for a couple of months. When I made it clear that I would never marry her, she was offended. Her business was booming, and she was smart enough to exclude him from every marriage. None with me? Sandy sounded offended, and I couldn't figure out why. None, I replied. I threw them away when I went to Saudi Arabia for the first time. There were no memories that I wanted to keep. I'll be damned if I didn't notice a little tear. Why the hell should it matter? I've never said this before, Mitchell, but I'm really sorry. I've been terrible to you. I'd like to think I'm a better person now. Looking back, I can't understand why I was so arrogant, so self-centered. I'm sorry if you don't want to hear this, but I promised myself that if I ever got the chance, I'd tell you. I know we'll never be together again, but life has taught me that karma can be a fool, and I don't want you to hate me forever. I stopped hating her a long time ago. It just wasn't worth the emotional energy. I'll never love her again. To be honest, I just didn't think about her anymore. That's what I told her. It seemed to cheer her up. Just at that moment, a man from the management company appeared. Although I didn't look for her when I returned home, old friends sometimes mentioned her. She got married again, and it lasted 4 years. She never lived in such a beautiful place as we did, never led the comfortable lifestyle that we enjoyed. It seemed like punishment enough. I was still surprised when she hugged me. I only saw her once before she died in a car accident. She was 42 when she died. I've read the obituary, but I've never attended a funeral. I did send a small bouquet without a postcard, in memory of the good years. I went to the city, checked into a hotel, and waited for the realtor's call. She called the next day and said the owner wanted to meet with me. I was looking out the window at the agent's office when she pulled up in a nice Audi. Her long red hair was loose and fluttering in the wind, and I had never seen a business suit look so beautiful. She was wearing huge sunglasses, so I couldn't see her face, but she looked familiar. When she entered the door, she stopped abruptly, staring at me. She took off her glasses, and I understood. It was Gloria. The last time I saw her was almost 6 years ago, in a bar. We broke into smiles and hugged each other, spending the next hour trying to catch up by asking the agent to excuse us for about an hour. What happened to you? After our conversation, you disappeared. I wanted another date. Her sparkling white teeth flashed. I followed the advice of the first man in 2 years with whom I did not have sex. I transferred here after getting a promotion. I found a psychiatrist, made good friends, played sports, in general, gathered my thoughts. I haven't slept with a man for over 2 years, and then only after we got married. I told him I was worth the wait, and he agreed. We spent 3 good years together. He was a dentist and a reservist. He was summoned, but even then he was safe. He was killed while doing volunteer work for the Afghan government, fixing children's teeth. 5 RPGs hit the clinic, leveling the building to the ground. They found him under the rubble, with 2 children still alive lying under him. She looked terribly sad for a few seconds, then smiled. I heard what you did to Tony. It bothered me for a while. I couldn't reconcile the man I knew with someone so violent. But in the end, I understood everything. I don't know if I would have gone down this path, but I've never been in this situation. Now promise me you'll let me cook you dinner tonight, and we'll call the agent. I did it, and we did it. She wasn't sure she wanted to sell, and I wasn't sure I wanted to invest that much money. We agreed to postpone it, and I returned to the hotel to prepare for the date. She had a very nice house in a very nice neighborhood. I learned a lot about real estate and estimated it in the range of 400 to 600,000, depending on the area and how good it is inside. Gloria met me at the door, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, smiling at me and my suit. I should have told you that in passing. Take off your tie and jacket. I'd offer you a drink, but I haven't touched alcohol since the night I left the bar. Will a glass of tea do? I pretty much gave up alcohol because of the time I spent abroad, so it didn't bother me at all. She insisted that I help her finish dinner. After putting the casserole in the oven, she took me on a guided tour. 11 acres with a stable to match the neighbors. An Olympic-sized swimming pool, a hot tub, a swimming pool, a guest house, and a fully equipped gym. I've adjusted my grade by a third. She laughed. I know it's too much for one person, but the fact is, I love this house. Jimmy bought it for me as a wedding present. She burst into tears a little bit, and I hugged her. She really loved him. Over dinner, she told me that she almost never went to the home gym, preferring to go to the gym. She said it helps her stay grounded. I told her about everything I've been doing since we broke up. Why didn't you get married a second time? I shrugged my shoulders. I've never found anyone I want so much. I had my eye on this hot redhead, but she disappeared years ago. I've probably been carrying a torch for her ever since. She laughed, accepting the joke as it should have been. Then she became serious. I've always wondered what it would be like to be with you. Well, here we are, both alone. I wouldn't mind if I was courted by someone I've always loved. Just know that your chances of separating me from my panties are slim, unless we make serious commitments to each other. Well, that's how it was. We spent the rest of the night laughing, feeling comfortable with each other. I helped her wash the dishes. She made me watch a chick movie with her on her giant TV, sitting next to me and holding my hand. That was enough. We have entered into an apartment partnership. For 50%, I redid them and spent every spare minute with her. We had some pretty intense sessions, but she stuck to her opinion, and that was the end of it. This has been our norm for the past 6 months. Here lately, she has hinted at a deeper partnership and talked about the ticking clock. I've never seen a woman who loves children more. And so I'm sitting here in this little cafe, idly twirling a diamond ring in my hand. Tonight, I was going to propose a formal merger, an equal partnership in everything except what she had before. She built it with her husband, and he deserved such respect. At some point in the near future, I was hoping there would be a few additions. I was pretty sure she would agree to it. I would ask you to wish me luck, but I suspect I won't need it. End.